My name is Evelyn Carter, and the last thing my mother ever said to me before I disappeared for 8 years was this: girls like us don't leave. We survive where we are planted. Then she took my acceptance letter from Stanford, folded it once, and dropped it straight into the kitchen fire. Not ripped, not hidden, burned. The paper curled black at the edges, while my little brother sat frozen at the table holding a spoonful of soup halfway to his mouth. My father never looked up from his plate. And me? I stood there smelling smoke and tomato broth and realizing something terrifying. Nobody in my family thought my future was worth saving. That was the night I walked out of our trailer in Ashland, Kentucky, with $86 in my backpack and a bus ticket I bought using grocery money I'd hidden inside a tampon box for 6 months. I didn't come back until my mother's funeral, and what I brought with me into that church that morning, Lord, that's the part my hometown still whispers about. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This channel is for the women who learned how to survive quietly, the women who smiled while their hearts cracked, the women who left home with nothing but a Walmart duffel bag and pure stubbornness. If you've ever had someone treat your dreams like they were too expensive to exist, go ahead and subscribe. And if there's one person in your life who needs to hear this story tonight, send it to her, because some girls aren't born to stay small. I grew up in Boyd County, Kentucky, in a rusted double-wide trailer that shook every time coal trucks rolled past our road. The floor near the bathroom sagged, the kitchen cabinets never fully closed, and every winter the pipes froze so bad my mother would boil water in giant silver pots just so we could wash dishes. My father worked at a steel fabrication plant 52 hours a week. My mother cleaned motel rooms off the Interstate Lodge off Route 23. Money wasn't tight. Money was gone before it arrived. But in our family, poverty wasn't the hardest thing. Expectation was. See, the Carter women had a rule nobody wrote down but everybody obeyed. Women stayed close. Women married local. Women worked practical jobs. Women never chased big dreams. Dreams were for rich people on television. My grandmother had my mother at 19. My mother had me at 18. By the time I turned 16, half the town acted like my future had already been decided. Church, marriage, maybe receptionist work, maybe daycare, maybe waitressing. Nothing wrong with those jobs, but I wanted more so bad it physically hurt. I wanted libraries bigger than our whole town. I wanted airports. I wanted cities where nobody knew my mother's maiden name. I wanted to sit in classrooms where people talked about inventions and satellites and medicine and things that mattered. At 14, I started sneaking into the guidance counselor's office during lunch. That's where I first saw a Stanford brochure. California. Palm trees, red roofs, students sitting on grass with laptops, girls laughing like the world belonged to them. I took the brochure home hidden inside my algebra textbook. That night, while my parents watched Wheel of Fortune, I sat on the bathroom floor reading every word under a flashlight. And something happened that scared me. For the first time in my life, I could picture another version of myself. Not somebody's wife, not somebody's exhausted mother, not another woman counting coupons at Dollar General. Me. Free. That became my secret. I studied like my life depended on it, because deep down I knew it did. I woke up at 4:30 a.m. every morning before school, because it was the only quiet time in the trailer. I took AP classes online using library computers because our internet got shut off every other month. I worked weekends at a diner called Maggie's Grill, refilling sweet tea and pretending not to hear drunk men call me sweetheart. And every dollar I made, I split 3 ways. 1 pile for the electric bill, 1 pile for groceries, One pile hidden inside the tampon box. Escape money. My mother noticed the change in me before anybody else did. "You think you're better than us now?" she asked one night while folding laundry. I was 17. "No," I said, but she narrowed her eyes anyway. "You've got that look." "What look?" she asked. "The look people get before they leave." I still remember how cold my stomach felt hearing that, because she already knew. Not details, not plans, but mothers know when daughters start emotionally packing their bags. The Stanford application took me 4 months. 4 months of essays rewritten in library parking lots. 4 months of recommendation letters. 4 months of hiding paperwork under my mattress. I never told anyone, not even my best friend, especially not my mother. Then came March 14th, a Tuesday, rainy, cold, one of those gray Appalachian afternoons where the sky looks permanently tired. I got home from school at 3:41. The envelope was sitting on the kitchen counter. White, heavy, Stanford logo in the corner. And my mother was already holding it. My heartbeat stopped so hard it actually hurt. She didn't yell. That would have been easier. Instead, she looked almost disappointed, like she'd caught me cheating on the family itself.
"What is this?" she asked quietly. I tried to lie, but my voice cracked before the first word finished. My father kept eating chili at the table. My little brother Noah stared at me wide-eyed. I walked toward the counter slowly. "It's just a college thing." "A college thing," she repeated. Then she opened the envelope. Right there, in front of everyone. She read the first paragraph silently. Her face changed. Not angry, worse, afraid. "You got in," she whispered. "Full scholarship, housing included, meal plan included." I had done it. Evelyn Carter, from a broken trailer in Kentucky, had somehow gotten into Stanford University. For exactly 6 seconds, I felt joy so big it almost lifted me off the floor. Then my mother walked to the wood stove. I thought she was just upset. I thought she needed space. Instead, she opened the stove door and tossed my future straight into the flames. I screamed, actually screamed. I lunged toward the stove, but my father grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. The envelope blackened instantly. Orange fire climbed across the edges. I can still smell it if I think too hard. "You are not leaving this family," my mother shouted. First time she'd raised her voice. "You hear me? Girls like us do not run off to California chasing fantasies. It's a scholarship. You belong here." My brother Noah started crying. My father finally spoke. "Enough." Just one word. Enough. Not to her, to me, like my pain was the disruption. I stopped fighting after that, not because I agreed, because something inside me snapped clean in half. That night, my mother acted like nothing happened. She made cornbread, watched television, asked Noah about homework. Meanwhile, I sat in my bedroom staring at the black soot under my fingernails from trying to save the letter. Around midnight, I heard my parents arguing quietly in the kitchen. I crept into the hallway. "She's smart enough to leave," my father whispered. "And then what? She never comes home? She starts thinking she's too good for us?" "She's our daughter, Diane. She's my daughter, and I know what happens to girls who leave." Silence. Then the sentence that changed everything. "I left once, too." I froze. My mother never talked about her past. Ever. "What are you talking about?" my father asked. Long silence. Then, I got into nursing school in Tennessee when I was 18. I stopped breathing. She was going to leave, my father whispered. She came back. No, my mother said, and her voice broke. They made me come back. I stood there in the dark hallway, realizing something horrifying. My mother wasn't protecting me from the world. She was punishing me for surviving the thing she couldn't. That realization sat inside me all night, like a lit match. At 3:12 a.m., I got out of bed. I packed 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, my diner apron, my geometry notebook, and the $86 from the tampon box. Then I did something stupid. I walked to the wood stove. Most of the letter had burned, but one corner survived. Just one. Stanford University congratulates. That was all left. I folded the burned scrap carefully and tucked it into my wallet. Then I left. No dramatic goodbye, no slammed doors. I walked 2 miles to the bus station, carrying a backpack with a broken zipper and shoes that leaked rainwater through the soles. The Greyhound arrived at 5:06 a.m. Destination? California. I was 18 years old, terrified, alone, and for the first time in my life, completely free.
California did not welcome me gently. It hit me all at once. The noise, the traffic, the heat rising off concrete, the way nobody looked at each other for more than 2 seconds. Back home, people knew your grandmother before they knew your name. In Palo Alto, nobody cared who you were. At first, that terrified me. Then, it became the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced. Because for the first time in my life, I got to decide who Evelyn Carter was. Not my mother, not my town, not the church ladies who whispered whenever a girl dyed her hair or wore lipstick too red. Me. The first month was brutal. I arrived in California with $86, a backpack, and a burned piece of paper in my wallet. That's it. Stanford deferred my enrollment because my paperwork disappeared after the scholarship office never received final confirmation documents, which made sense, considering my acceptance letter had literally been turned into fireplace smoke. I slept 3 nights in a women's shelter near San Jose, pretending I was between apartments. I was too embarrassed to admit the truth. The truth sounded ridiculous even to me. Hi. My mother burned my scholarship letter because she was afraid I'd leave Kentucky. Sounds fake when you say it out loud. On the 4th day, I found work at a diner off El Camino Real. The owner was a Korean woman named Mrs. Han, who wore sneakers with every outfit and called everyone honey, even when she was angry. She hired me because I worked doubles without complaining. "You got survival eyes," she told me once while counting receipts. What does that mean? Means life already hit you hard. I didn't answer, because she was right. I rented half a room from a nursing student named Bianca. Not a room. Half. A curtain separated our beds. Rent was $420 a month. I ate instant noodles for almost 6 weeks straight. Sometimes Mrs. Han gave me leftover pancakes at closing. I'd sit outside behind the diner at midnight eating cold pancakes under parking lot lights, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. A Stanford admissions counselor called the diner. Actually called. Mrs. Han screamed across the kitchen, "College phone for Kentucky!" Every cook turned and stared at me. I nearly dropped a tray. The counselor's name was Rebecca Miller. She told me they'd been trying to contact me for weeks. When I explained what happened to the acceptance letter, silence. Then, "Evelyn, are you safe?" Nobody had asked me that before. Not one person. I started crying so hard I had to sit on the floor behind the soda machine. I tried apologizing for crying. She stopped me immediately. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "You don't apologize for surviving." 3 weeks later, Stanford reinstated my admission. Full scholarship, housing included. I moved into a freshman dorm carrying 1 suitcase and enough emotional damage to fill an entire moving truck. The other students looked different from anyone I'd ever known. Kids from New York prep schools, international students who spoke 4 languages, girls whose parents were surgeons and venture capitalists. Meanwhile, I still flinched whenever somebody raised their voice. The first semester nearly broke me. Not academically, emotionally. See, nobody talks enough about what happens after escape. Movies end when the girl leaves home. Real life starts there. I didn't know how to relax. I didn't know how to trust people. I hoarded ketchup packets in my backpack because part of me still believed I could become poor again overnight. One night, my roommate found me crying because I'd accidentally broken a coffee mug. She stared at me confused. "It's literally a mug." But she didn't understand. In my house, broken things became screaming matches. At Stanford, people just cleaned things up. That took me years to understand. Years. I majored in biomedical engineering. Not because it was easy, because it was impossible, and I needed to prove something to myself. I studied like my future depended on it, because somewhere deep down, I still believed love had to be earned through achievement. Freshman year became sophomore year. Sophomore year became graduate research, then internships, then a biotech startup. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I became successful, like genuinely successful, the kind of successful that would have sounded fictional back in Kentucky. By 30, I owned equity in a medical technology company developing portable blood screening devices for rural hospitals. By 32, I bought my own house. By 33, Forbes put my face on a Women Under 35 in Health Innovation list. That part made me laugh, because the photo looked polished and confident. Meanwhile, the actual picture behind the scenes was me panic-calling customer support because I forgot my Netflix password again. Success doesn't magically heal people. It just gives damaged people better furniture. The first message from home came 8 years after I left. 8. It arrived on Facebook from my younger brother Noah. Subject line, "Mom died yesterday." I stared at the message for almost an hour before opening it fully. Stroke. Fast. Funeral Saturday. Then one final sentence. "She never stopped checking the mailbox for you." That wrecked me. Absolutely wrecked me. Because hatred would have been easier, but love mixed with fear, love twisted into control, that's harder to untangle. I booked a flight home at 2:14 a.m. The plane landed in Lexington Friday evening. Kentucky smelled exactly the same.
Rain. Grass. Diesel fuel. Wet pavement. Somehow home and not home at all. I rented a black SUV because the airport had run out of economy cars. Driving back into Ashland felt like opening an old wound with your bare hands. The same gas station, same church, same faded water tower. Even the diner where I had my first date was still there. Nothing had changed. Except me. My father opened the trailer door before I knocked. He looked 20 years older. Smaller, too. Grief shrinks people. For 3 seconds, we just stared at each other. Then he whispered, "Hey, Bug." That nickname nearly destroyed me.
because suddenly I was 18 again. I hugged him first, and my father, my silent, steelworker father, started crying into my shoulder. The funeral happened Saturday morning. Tiny Baptist church, white flowers, cheap coffee in styrofoam cups. Half the town came. Not because my mother was famous, because small towns attend grief like it's community service. Women squeezed my hands, telling me how proud my mother was, toward the end. That confused me. Toward the end? Then Noah explained. 2 years before the stroke, my Forbes article got shared around town. My mother printed it, framed it, hung it beside the family photos. I couldn't process that. The woman who burned my acceptance letter framed my success story. Human beings are complicated in the ugliest ways sometimes. After the service, everybody gathered in the church basement, eating casseroles and ham sandwiches. That's when Aunt Brenda cornered me. Every family has one aunt who treats gossip like an Olympic sport. "California sure worked out for you," she said, smiling too hard. I nodded politely. Then she leaned closer. "Your mama regretted letting you leave, you know." Letting? That word lit something dangerous inside me. Because nobody let me do anything. I fought for my life. I swallowed the anger anyway. But then Aunt Brenda kept going. She always said if she'd held on tighter, maybe you would have stayed. And suddenly, after 8 years, I finally understood. My mother never forgave herself for becoming my cage. That realization hit me so hard I couldn't breathe right for a second. I left the church basement and walked outside into cold November air. That's when Noah followed me carrying a small cardboard box. "She wanted you to have this." Inside was my old geometry notebook, a faded diner name tag, and the burned Stanford letter fragment. The tiny surviving piece. "Stanford University congratulates." I stared at it silently. Then Noah handed me one more thing, a sealed envelope, my name written in my mother's handwriting. My hands shook opening it. Inside was a single page folded twice. "Evelyn, I spent most of my life believing leaving meant abandoning people. Then you left and became someone brave enough to survive anyway. I was angry because I loved you, and because I was jealous. Nobody saved me when I was 18. I convinced myself stopping you was protection. Truth is, I was afraid you'd discover how small my own life felt. That wasn't your burden to carry. I kept waiting for you to come home angry. Instead, you came home successful. Maybe that hurts because it proves you were right to leave. There's one more thing. Under the kitchen sink, inside the blue toolbox, is the money I secretly saved after you left. I told myself if you ever came back needing help, I'd give it to you. You never needed it. I'm proud of you anyway. Love, Mom." I read the letter 3 times standing in church parking lot wind. Then I cried so hard my knees gave out. Not pretty movie crying either. Ugly crying, years of grief leaving my body all at once. My father sat beside me on the curb quietly while I cried. After a while, he said something I'll never forget. "She watched the Travel Channel every night after you left." I laughed through tears. "What?" "Said it made her feel closer to wherever you were." That nearly broke me again. That night, after everyone left, I stayed alone in the trailer, the same room I once escaped from. I walked through every room slowly. The sagging floor, the old stove, the hallway where I overheard my mother confess she'd once tried to leave too. Then I opened the blue toolbox under the sink. Inside was cash, stacks of 20s wrapped in rubber bands.
$9,400. Years of motel cleaning money. Saved for me. I sat on the kitchen floor until almost sunrise, staring at that money, realizing something painful. My mother loved me. She just loved me through fear instead of freedom. And fear ruins people, especially women taught their whole lives that survival matters more than happiness. The next morning, before leaving Kentucky, I did one final thing. I drove to the local community college, walked into the financial aid office, and donated every dollar from that toolbox to create a scholarship fund. The Diane Carter Women's Return Scholarship. For women over 25 restarting education after life interrupted it. Single mothers, former caregivers, women who paused dreams because survival came first. The receptionist asked why I wanted it anonymous. I smiled. Because this isn't about credit. Then I drove back toward the airport with the burned Stanford fragment in my wallet. Same place I'd carried it for 15 years. Only now it meant something different. Not proof of pain, proof of survival. People back home still talk about me sometimes. Some say I abandoned my family, some say I escaped. Some say my mother and I loved each other the wrong way. Maybe all three are true. But here's what I know now. Sometimes leaving home is the most loving thing a daughter can do. Because sometimes the only way to break a cycle is to walk out of it. And sometimes the women who hurt us most are just wounded girls who never got the chance to become anything else. That doesn't excuse the damage, but it explains the sadness. I keep my mother's letter in a frame now beside my desk in California, not because it erases what happened, because it reminds me that people can love you deeply and still fail you completely. And if there's a girl listening to this tonight, from a tiny town somewhere, a girl hiding college applications under her mattress, a girl thinking her dreams are too big for the place she came from, baby, listen carefully. You are not wrong for wanting more. Wanting another life does not make you selfish. And the people who truly love you, they may not understand you're leaving right away. But one day, if they're honest, they'll realize you were never running away from them. You were running towards yourself.